Name, but things are pretty simple. I would like to invite up here Carlos Gago from Agroferias Campesinas. Carlos, please. Just for the sake of organization, I'm going to make a few opening remarks explaining why we proposed this session, and then I'll hand it over to Richard, and we'll present our cases. So, allow me to read. I'm good at running markets, not so good at presentations. Farmers markets are going, as we all know, through a revival. From Rio de Janeiro to New York, from Lima to Rome, from Accra to, oh, he's here. Let me invite to the stage the mayor of Douala, Cameroon, Mr. Roger Mbassa. Is that right, sir? So, okay, here we go. Everybody's here. So as I was saying, the farmers markets are going through a revival all over the world. Farmers and eaters are coming together and rediscovering the pleasure of eating and buying directly from producers in bustling streets and squares. It's a global phenomenon. Whereas the picturesque and historical markets persist, as they have since the beginning of human settlements, we are witnessing a new wave of farmers markets that come in a myriad of shapes and forms, helping to overcome the dichotomy between cities and urban areas. As Mr. Graziano keenly pointed out yesterday, this dichotomy needs to be overcome. And markets do more than provide food. They foster a sense of community and connection based on old-fashioned trust, values the globalized, homogenized food system is incapable of delivering. They inject life into neighborhoods. They inject life into cities. And in the midst of this wave came the pandemic, posing a daunting challenge to many markets and testing the grit and resilience of local food systems. As global food chains broke down and market managers had to find new ways to meet demand and face the challenge, they also came together. And thus, during the pandemic, Carmelo Troccoli, director of Italy's Campagna Antica Foundation, had the vision of bringing together market organizers from all over the world to collaborate. And thus was born the World Farmers Market Coalition. And then in the whirlwind since its creation a few months ago, we were discussing, and one of our missions is to call upon cities to pay more attention to markets like us. And this is why we're here today. Market managers and mission-driven markets represent a new opportunity for the urban food system. Markets are an agile expression of territorial food governance, social enterprise, and behavioral strategies that work from small cities to megacities. Richard McCarthy will be joining us shortly to present further in greater detail the organization and explain why markets must be a part part of the redesign of food systems. We're also going to talk about 2 markets that illustrate this novel generation. Here next to me is Carlos Gago, the director of Agroferias Campesinas from Lima in Peru. It's an NGO that works with small farmers and peasants that has done a beautiful work in Lima, making the biodiversity and foodways of the incredible food culture of Peru have a safe haven. And then I will do a presentation of Junta Local. I'm wearing 2 hats here today. A market based here in Rio de Janeiro. And then we also have the company of the mayor of Douala, and they are on the verge of launching a new project which involves markets. And without further ado, we have Richard straight from New York. Richard, we had a few technical issues in the beginning, but I think they've been solved. There he is, Richard McCarthy.
Thank you, Thiago. Indeed, I don't know how much more I can add to your marvelous introduction. It hurts me to see you all there in Rio because I wish I were there, but I'm grateful that you've been able to allow me to join you. I serve as the provisional president for the World Farmers Markets Coalition. It is, as Thiago had described, a very young organization, 1.5 years old. We've only formally been legally incorporated in Rome as a Rome-based organization in June of this year. I do have a slide that I think I can share. I've just got a few slides to show, but it may be too difficult to do that, and I'm happy to do without because I think better time spent with those who are physically there with you. I am a longtime public market practitioner, farmers market organizer, and was delighted when Carmelo Troccoli in Rome reached out to many of us around the world during the pandemic, recognizing that in isolation, many of us who run markets were doing so in very challenging times when the perception of markets as these informal get-togethers, these pop-up happenings, maybe could not occur during the pandemic. And he wanted to learn from others, since he at Campagna Amica runs 1,000 farmers markets in Italy, based on very much the same ethos and mission-driven perspective that markets pursue all over the planet. And what he discovered is what we have since learned, is that no, markets did not collapse under the weight of the pandemic. If anything, they made very clear their relevance as essential services. Their agility demonstrated that as infrastructure, very light infrastructure, they could respond to many different settings. And as a result now, we were recognized by the FAO Food Coalition as a food coalition. We are housed at Campagna Amica in Rome, and we represent market organizers and market allies from over 40 countries, with 60 member associations, some as large as 10,000 farmers markets like in the United States, or as small as 3 or 4 in a municipal region. But what this does represent is actually a considerable force, one that may appear invisible as we casually or appear to casually assemble beneath tents and umbrellas, but this represents 200,000 farming families, and over 300 million consumers. And this is just the beginning. And not to fixate on scale, because one of the things I think we really want to reevaluate is the scale of developing our food systems. And actually, rather than being sucked into what are often very difficult national conversations, actually really forge our strongest ties with municipal ones, because of the scale of food systems tend to be municipal. So we have one vision, but by no means am I to suggest, and I think both Carlos and Thiago will reinforce this, is that there are many different points of entry, whether driven by peasant and farmer associations, driven by consumers, driven by health authorities to address chronic diseases. The markets are these very agile templates, but there's no kind of one size fits all. What we do share, though, is a belief in a multi-stakeholder approach. We believe in at least a triple bottom line, that markets are best when, first of all, managed. They do not just happen. They tend to be very light institutions, but also very transparent because they reflect the farmers market interest among consumers is a madding desire for transparency and trust. So in that equation, what we see is that we're building a social contract between farmers, often the farmers who are locked out of emerging opportunities, or they're too small to really benefit from more industrial wholesale strategies. Not that we're against them, but there's an opportunity to learn and to strengthen these smaller farmers. Often it is women farmers or women representatives in the markets who accrue all this knowledge that we think is worth building upon. Consumers who join forces because they have a great desire to find fresh fruits and vegetables that reflect their cultural interest, that reflect their interest in biodiversity and flavor, and that together we create a community with the communities, the neighborhoods, the population centers that host the markets, and they become really critical parts of this triple bottom line, this multi-stakeholder relationship, where together we begin to forge a new social contract that I think really accurately reflects the goals and the ambitions of the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, to look at what kind of investments can we be making in order to re-engineer our food systems that reflect those who are engaged in it. And so I'd say that for many years, and I've been a farmers market practitioner for many years, it took about a decade before my experience was really tested at a time of extraordinary climatic stress in New Orleans, where I had been running farmers markets for a decade. And then in 2005, our city of New Orleans in the US was flooded. Our lives were thrown into utter disarray. And what we found was that despite these challenges, we did restart our markets far quicker than traditional brick and mortar. We discovered that our managed markets are centers for innovation, and that the social contract we had built was building resilience. And as we know, those of us who undergo the challenges of climate chaos, the resilience cannot be built afterwards. You have to build it before. The social contracts we build are very often difficult to see because they're not built under brick and mortar, they're built under tents and umbrellas. But it's this space that, if invested in, we've only begun to see what this can yield. In the United States, we've been able to develop and expand to Canada nutrition incentive programs, the Farmers Market Nutrition Program, which mitigates the risk for vulnerable consumers to purchase fresh fruits and vegetables. This can be scaled at a small to a national basis. It can focus on seniors, families, any number of targeted audiences, because it builds trust in the public. It brings social programs to the town square. It democratizes our food system. Similarly, there are investments in farmers to diversify and to build their capacity so that they can begin to direct their futures. This is the opportunity that I think both Carlos and Thiago will shine a light on. And hopefully, I'm very excited to learn from Douala the challenges to build alternative and new food distribution systems, and how these informal ones that formalize the informal are places where we can learn, especially if we invest in them. So with that, why don't I stop here? I'm grateful to be included in this gathering, and I hand it back to the floor. Tiago, to you.
Thank you very much, Richard. And I will hand it over now to Carlos.
Bueno, todos los que estamos
Great. All of us who are here, we need a 20, we needed a teacher for 20, 30 years of our lives. We needed a taxi driver 3 times a week. But if we talk about farmers, we need farmers every day of our lives. And we need them 3 times a day: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. However, farmers live in unjust conditions. And their children are leaving the fields because they don't want to be like their parents. They want more opportunity. However, not everything is lost. That's why I would like to start this presentation with Frank Lee, who is a young farmer, who is only 25 years old. And even during the pandemic, he worked and he offered his produce in the capital city. I would like to tell you the experience of Agroferias Campesinas, which is a movement that belongs to the Farmers Association and has existed for 15 years. And in the 2 first months of the pandemic, we were not able to tell farmers not to produce, and they needed their income. So the pandemic for us meant an opportunity, and we reinvented ourselves, and we've grown. So we are Agroferias Campesinas, and we are part of this new coalition of farmers markets all over the world. And how did we begin? We began 10 years ago with this need of small farmers in Peru. And in Peru, there are 2,300,000 farmers, and most of them are family farmers, and between 1 and 2 hectares. And 85% dedicate themselves to provide food to local markets. But 80% of the city consumes food from family farming. But family farmers do not have access to insurance, they don't have access to communication, and they don't have access to the market either. And in Peru, many people, many producers, many farmers, they don't know why they farm what they farm. They just repeat whatever everybody's doing. So what we did was we brought farmers closer to the market, and we wanted to conserve our biodiversity. And we wanted to do that in the hands of our farmers. And we wanted farmers to do that. And we can see the native potatoes in Peru. There are 4,000 different varieties of potatoes. And you can see in the picture, you can see that there are 400 varieties of potato. So on the other hand, we have the city. What happens in the city? In the city, the indexes of high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease, they are rampant, and fast food has grown a lot. So there is a need of an interaction between the rural area and the city and the urban area. So what we did was we wanted to bring them closer. Before we started, we mapped the city and we asked, would you like to have a farmer's market in your neighborhood? And we got an amazing results. People they didn't like farmers, that a synonym of farmers was lack of order, chaos, and they didn't want that because they like to buy their produce from the supermarket. That's why we decided to do a different market, street market. We wanted to provide a street market, a farmer's market that is very organized with beautiful colors, so that we could contribute to the city. So we proposed this farmer's market, and this is not new because we've had farmers markets for a long time, but it's self-sustainable, and farmers from day one has paid for participating in the farmers market, because we don't want to just provide something. We want them to be part of it. They have to pay for the accommodation and whatever they need. So when we work, we want them to have a sense of belonging, that they want to linger there. So we have producers who come from very far away. We started as the first picture that you can see, with many farmers that there were many farmers who didn't want to continue, but a group continued, and we realized that they could be the best farmers, and they were very good farmers, but they didn't know how to sell. They didn't know how to serve clients, and if there was, they charged different prices for foreigners, and so we decided to do capacity building, such as marketing and sales. So we established a protocol, and we started to work with some principles and some values to build an orderly fashion, an orderly farmers market. You can see that the bottom picture, that they're dressed up with the apron, and because we wanted to show that even though they are of humble origin, this is the most important farmers market in Lima. And this picture was taken 1 month before the pandemic, and we had 6,000 people in an avenue in Lima. It was madness, and farmers now ask us to open the doors to more stands, and we are working to have more street markets, farmers markets. And when the pandemic came, we had to stop for 2 months, and we had to do delivery, and we didn't know how to do that, but we wanted to continue. And now what we do is we have our own platform. We just bought an automobile to deliver food, to deliver produce. And we are different because we promote biodiversity. And in Lima, you can find produce that you won't find anywhere else. As I mentioned, we're losing our biodiversity, so we have generated a market for the products that nobody remembered anymore. And so the farmers market is an opportunity for women to start generating their own income, because women are the best in farmers markets. And also, there are children now who are interested in the farmers market because they can see that there is movement in the social network. So we have children who look upon their parents as a role model. And now the farmers market is like a laboratory that shows us that it is possible to organize ourselves without causing any harm to the neighborhood, and we are beneficial to the neighborhood. And what we've done since day one was to build a beautiful farmers market. The only thing that we get for free is the license to have our farmers market. We have our own cleaning structure. We have our own electricity. Everything is self-sustainable, and we've grown. But we continue to dream, and we want to have a supermarket chain. We want to have more farmers, but now we have 80 farmers that come from 21 regions in Peru, and Peru has 24 regions, and we are promoting fair prices. Many organic fairs or markets, what we do is we promote healthy food as a right. And this is our difference. We promote fair prices, but we want to bring together all the farmers. And one of the challenges of this presentation is that everything that is so beautiful that we're telling you now, we in Peru, we don't exist for the state. And since we were in the thing is, they don't recognize us. So we are working on a municipal authorization, a certificate, and we want to have our own land to work in the city. We want to have our own area where we can have our farmers market. And we now have learned that we can be a hybrid between a market, a supermarket, and a fair, a farmer's market. Thank you very much. You can go to our website, www.agroferias.pe.
Thank you so much, Carlos. It's my turn now to talk about Junta Local, of which I am one of the founders and currently the CEO, and along with a talented team of young people, a few of them who are right here today. We organize and support a community of 183 producers from not only Rio de Janeiro, but from some adjacent states, and we also represent local producers from farther afield in Brazil. We started off in 2014, about the same time Carlos did, and many other organizations in this new generation of farmers markets and markets. And ever since we've grown. Currently we run markets almost every week in different streets and squares of the cities. And what's also interesting about Junta Local is that also we have a website, and I'll get into this point a little bit ahead. So taking the lead from Richard and talking about our entry points and our motivation, I think it's almost redundant in here at the Midland Food Urban Policy Forum that it's about food, good food. So I won't. This does not require so much explanation. But basically, our entry point was more from the perspective of urbanites who wanted access to good, local, and fair food. Carlo Petrini is not in the room here because basically we stole the the good, local, good, clean, and fair motto of the slow food movement, but we just changed it a little bit to include local, to emphasize the sort of relationship we want to foster with the producers of our community. And this might be strange because we are in Rio, that is known for many street markets, but the reality was 8 years ago that most of these markets are for basically people who resell from other supplying centers. So you don't really know where most of your food is coming from when you buy at the Rio markets. And on the other hand, you also have the organic markets, which do a really good job of providing a venue for organic producers. But at the same time, we felt these markets were a bit lacking in the sort of variety and vibrancy that other markets have. So markets that have street food, that have different kinds of artisanal producers. So our idea was to, and hence the name Junta, which means to gather, to bring together all of these producers that are part of our community in the same space, not only as a physical space, but also in the sense of a community, because everyone was trying in their own way to access consumers directly, as it must be in the food system, but all of them were facing many challenges. And it's important to overcome these challenges to be able to take care with whatever ingredients you're using, if you're a farmer, with the care you dedicate to the soil and environment. So this was basically our motivation at the beginning, and how this evolved, and this has to do with what Carlos was talking about and Richard mentioned too, is all the effort and work that goes into managing this. So first and foremost, what we say is that what's important about how we approach our community and the way we organize our markets is that it has to be exciting. You have to be things that you want to eat, and people need to leave the market wanting to cook everything that they saw there. So we bring the dimension of gastronomy into our market. So side by side at Junta Local, you will find farmers, but you might also find a young chef who is trying to showcase a new project. And this leads us to our second strategy, which is diversity. So we try to be as diverse as possible, but we always do a lot of curating. So this curating happens from the beginning. So there's a whole process for producers to be selected into our community. So we've elaborated different guidelines, a charter of values that was also drafted collectively by the producers. So lots of care goes into that. So as they enter Junta Local and in each marketplace. So everything is organized in terms of the different variety of foods that are there and the quality of the food. So we taste everything. We inquire as to the ingredients that are used, how everything is sourced. So this is what made Junta Local so successful and allows us to keep on doing even our markets to this day. Another interesting point about Junta Local and of other initiatives in this new generation of markets is that we are online. And this is not for the sake of being online, because having a website is interesting, but this is an essential strategy for survival. And this is something the pandemic really proved, because in Rio, at least, this was not the case in other cities, but while brick and mortar grocery stores and supermarkets were allowed to keep selling during the pandemic, many markets had to shut down for a while, which makes no sense at all. But this is what happened here. And so many producers, they had to resort to online tools to keep on selling. And from the beginning of our project, we, despite several limitations, had our website based on the same premises of a market. So this is a platform that allows producers and farmers to sell directly, to decide the price, to decide whatever they produce. So they still have the reins of the whole process, and they use our website to sell. And as we evolved, the website has evolved, and we have included other strategies. So right now we also have a box order system sort of inspired by the CSAs, so that clients can access producers and good local food through that. Lastly, and a very important strategy, which has to do with the sense of community and the transparency that is also a common trait of all these new markets, is the fact that in coming together, we have devised different rules, different procedures to organize the system. So all of the producers vote on different issues. They get to decide major changes are submitted to deliberation, and so on. So everything from the way we set up our markets to the venues where we choose to have the markets to the way we run our website is part of this collective process of figuring out how to survive in an environment that many times does not incentivize small local producers and hence does not incentivize good food. So this is how we're trying to make things happen. And as Carlos said, so when producers from the coalition get together and when we meet, it's almost like a therapy session because we all have very similar problems and we get to share them. So number one usually is policies and regulations. So most city governments, and Rio is no exception, they don't have the bureaucracy or the legal procedures and whatnot for us to run our market. So many times, as Carlos says, we are pirates, and gladly so. But but this is a very delicate situation because we can run into problems. People might have products that taken and so on and pay fees. So we've been trying to work with the city for many years to find better regulations, but this is a problem, especially in Brazil, when every time there's a new mayor, everything changes. But since Eduardo Paes is not here, we can say that we will keep on doing a few things not so legally as pirates, but that's the way we have to do it, as much as we would like to follow regulations. But these regulations many times simply do not exist. Other challenges have to do with governance. Even though we have we have a system in place, as we grow and as more farmers and producers enter our community, this becomes a very complex task because as I was saying previously, we work alongside a huge variety of producers. So farmers have one situation, chefs have another situation, people who make other sorts of products have another situation. And in line with that, capacity building, because also as people grow, the skill set required also becomes more complex. So this is something we try to bring to our community, not only working in terms of how to market, how to tell our stories, but also how to simple things from managing a spreadsheet to when to plant certain crops. So this is Junta Local. Thank you very much. If you want to take a look at our website and follow us on Instagram, all the info is there. And with that said, I will invite Monsieur Roger, s'il vous plaît, pour quelques mots.
Now, I would like to talk about the issue of supply in our city, which is the city of Douala in Central Africa, with 4 million of population, 4 million and a half. And now with a population that is growing in about 100,000, 150,000 people a year. So we are a city that we are attracting the population of other cities. And what we have noted is that the city is consuming more and more imported produce. Rice that comes from Asia, Southeast Asia. We have also other produces that are not produced in Cameroons. So these local produce are becoming more and more expensive. And the produce that becomes more expensive, they also expire quickly. So we have launched a big project of trying to reconnect our food system in Douala. And now our goal is to make people to consume the locally produced produce. And therefore, um, a while ago, we have gathered around 41 cities to organize ourselves in a way that the producer, so that the producer can use and produce their products, and therefore we need to reduce the size of the cycle of the economic cycle between the producer and the consumer with all its aggregated value. So the producer that usually doesn't have almost nothing, and that's why their children, instead of remaining in their cities, they go to Douala. So we have this issue, and at the same time that people go to Douala, Douala is not able to feed itself. And that comes to a point that we need to import flour from Europe. So we have launched this project of trying to organize ourselves in our small communities and cities around Douala so that we can create a cooperation of producers. And then we're trying to create this capacity of communication with the mayors of these small cities because these mayors are the key for this strategy. So this will be the center of the consumption issue and the gastronomic center of Douala. So Douala could also organize the logistics so that the city can receive food with lesser costs. And then we can also gather all the produce in contact with the big markets so that they can buy that produce and that we can, in this way, complete the cycle of consumption, also bettering the quality of this whole chain. And then the farmer, he can produce in a way that that small city in which they live can continue and live on, so the children of those fathers, they can stay in the city instead of migrating and also get education in their own city. And that needs a lot of support from the government and not only in the municipal level. That also an issue of investments in roadways so that we can better our transportation system, and also the farmers that use the transport system. We also need them to accept to work together. We are hopeful because everyone is very excited and a lot of farmers are working together already. And we are continuing in that direction because the city is interested that the prices and the produce prices lower. So we don't believe it's possible that something that is produced locally should cost twice the rice that is imported from Asia. So, of course, the consumer would prefer to buy the rice that comes from Asia instead of the rice that was produced locally. That is why we are confident in this strategy, so that it brings changes, especially in the participation of the city level, the state level, but also farmers. Everyone is interested that this will work out well, and that is what I wanted to share about this issue. Thank you so much.
Okay, we need to wrap it up. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the forum, and please support your farmers market wherever you go back to. Thank you very much.